Welcome back to the third video here on my series of Flexbox in CSS. So if you haven't seen the first couple of videos, video number 2 covered the parent properties that you can set on a Flex container. And then video 1 was kind of an overview of Flexbox, how it works, some fundamental terminology and stuff like that. So feel free to check those out if anything I discuss in this video doesn't make sense, as this video is going to focus on Flex children and the specific properties and values that you can set on Flex children to change the behavior of your Flexbox. Okay, and just to make sure we're on the same page, within a Flexbox, you kind of have two separate parts. You have a Flex container, and then you also have Flex items. So as you can see in this diagram here, the Flex container, this is going to be like the purple background of this diagram. And then the items are going to be the orange squares within this container. So this would be like item 1, item 2, item 3. And in today's video, we're going to talk about the different properties that you can set on these Flex items to change the behavior of your Flexbox and to give you more control on laying some different things out within your Flexbox. And say hi to Ragnar there, being all cute in the background, being a good boy, sleeping very nicely there. Doesn't happen all the time. But here, the first property we're going to go over is order. So by default, Flex items are laid out in their source order. So what this means is that, let's say you create a Flex container and say you have 3 elements within that Flex container. Well, they're going to just be placed in the order in which that HTML is written. So if you have item 1 in your HTML and then item 2 and item 3, it's just going to default in that order. However, you can change this order, and you can do this using the order property. So all of these items are going to default to 0 as their order. And since they are all 0, if items have the same order, then they're just going to go to their source order. That's going to be how they're ordered within your Flex container. All right. So if all of these have the same order, then this item, it must be written before this item just in the HTML. All right. But you can change that behavior. If I set order 5 here, that is now going to make sure. So say I set order 5 for this first item in my HTML. That's actually going to order that last in my Flex container, because all these other 2 are still going to have their default order of order 0. And it's going to rank these or order these from lowest to highest number. Okay. And it kind of depicts this here. If this has an order of 1, 1, 1, 2, and 3, it means that these 3 right here, these are going to default to their source order since they all have the same order set on them for these Flex items. And then 2 and 3 here, since they have an higher order value, they are going to be later in the Flex container. And then you can also use negative numbers as it shows here. So -1 is going to come first, then 1, then 2, then 5. And here 2, 2, 99, these 2s here, since they have the same value, they're going to revert to their source order, as it says right here. Items with the same order revert to their source order. Okay. So this is how you can switch up the ordering of your Flex items. The default behavior is just to order them how they are written within your HTML, but you can change this with this order property. Now, I don't tend to use this very often, as if I find myself wanting to change the order up a lot, it can indicate that my HTML just isn't structured very well. So I tend not to use this a bunch, but just kind of goes to show that you do have this ability. Up next is Flex Grow. So this defines the ability for Flex items to grow if necessary. It accepts a unitless value that serves as a proportion. It dictates what amount of available space inside the Flex container the item should take up. If all items have Flex Grow set to 1, the remaining space in the container will be distributed equally to all children because they all have the same Flex Grow. So they all take up the same proportion. But if one of the children has a value of 2, that child would take up twice as much space as the others in your flex container. Okay, so in this example here, these 3 items in this top diagram, they all have a flex grow of 1. So they're all going to take up the same proportion of space within the flex container. But in this one here, the middle item has a flex grow of 2. So it's going to take up twice as much space in this flex container, as you can see in this diagram here, compared to the 2 items on the side here. This is very similar to using like FR units within CSS grid or fractional units. It's going to take up twice as much space here. And then as it says here, it defaults to 0 and then negative numbers are invalid. So this can be a good way to size your items and to have them kind of grow to fill your container proportionally to your other items. All right. Now you also have flex shrink. And this defines the ability for flex items to shrink if necessary. And this is going to work the very same way. You can set the proportion that you want it to shrink compared to other items. Now you can also set a flex basis on your item. So this defines the default size of an element before the remaining space is distributed. It can be a length in percentages, rems, etc., or a keyword. The auto keyword means look at my width or height property, which was temporarily done by the main size keyword until deprecated. The content keyword means size it based on the item's content. This keyword isn't well supported yet, so it's hard to test and harder to know what its brethren, max content, min content, and fit content do. If set to 0, the extra space around content isn't factored in. If set to auto, the extra space is distributed based on its flex grow value. So this can kind of allow you to set a more or less default size for an item before the remaining space is distributed. And then a shorthand property here is flex. So this is a shorthand for flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis, all combined into one. And the default is 0, 1 auto. So that's going to set the grow to 0, the shrink to 1, and your basis to auto. But if you set just a single number like flex 5, that changes the flex basis to 0%. So it's like setting flex grow to 5, flex shrink to 1, and basis to 0. And it says it is recommended that you use this shorthand property rather than set individual properties. The shorthand sets the other values intelligently. So when in doubt, use this shorthand property to set your flex grow, shrink, and basis. And CSS will set other default values that you don't set here in a fairly intelligent way. And then you also have the align self property. So this allows you to align individual items differently than what you might set on your entire container. So for your flex container, you might set your align items property to be like flex end, center, flex start, something like that. But maybe you just have one item that you want to be offset from the others. So you could set your container to flex start here, and that's going to put all these items at the start of your flex container. But then maybe you just want to have one item as flex end. Well, for that item, on that item specifically, you can use the align self property and set that to flex end. And that's going to align that property to the end of your container here. And you're going to be able to use all of the similar properties as this align items on your container. So you can set it to stretch, flex start, flex end, baseline. All those properties are going to be valid when you're aligning an item itself. So you could set this to flex end while everything else is at the start. You could center it while everything else is at the start with flex center, or you could also set it to stretch to fill out the entire container. Okay, so use the align self property to align individual items differently from your entire container. Okay. So those are the child properties you can set here. Definitely a bit less than the parent properties, but these will allow you to kind of adjust the ordering and make these kind of grow, shrink, or align just a little bit differently than what you do in your container. But honestly, when I use Flexbox, the far majority of the time, I'm really just setting properties on the container, and I don't tend to have to use these properties on these individual items much. But they're still helpful to know because every once in a while, you might need to change the alignment of just a single item or change the ordering or make it grow or shrink a little bit more. Okay. And really, that kind of gives you everything you need to know about Flexbox. You have an overview of kind of how it works, the parent properties, the child properties, and now it's a matter of kind of playing around with it and getting to know it a little bit better. So thanks for tuning into this, and I'll see you in that next one.